chlorophyll, high species diversity, and then down here is the maximum domoic acid values we have on, this is just Long Beach, and you can see every year we have a warm cycle, we have a domoic acid closure, some of them more severe than others. And in the cool phase, we haven't had any issues with domoic acid, so this is when the PDO is in a negative phase. And the thing to think about here is those are also the years when we have depressed populations. Not to say in those days you can't go out and get a limited clams, but lower clam populations than we do in those warm years. So definitely something concerning for management and thinking about flexibility in the future. We were supposed to be entering a cool phase in 2017. I haven't put that on there. It turns out that we're probably not quite doing that yet from what I'm reading. And again, we have problems this year, so possibly in the fall. I don't have a perfect crystal ball, but you know, not the rosiest picture at this point. And then I figured just there might be some interest in the room. This is the 2015 domoic acid event, which is the largest event that we've ever seen on the West Coast. And thinking about Little Bay, it was a low water year, not a lot of freshets. You can see in about May, our salinity really jumped up. That means we had water from the ocean intruding deep into the bay. This is a bay center station. And with that came the Pseudonychia. And we see for the first time really that I could find in any of the data, oysters hitting 6 parts per million of DA and manila clams reaching 10. So just something to think about. And that's it.
Zach, you want to take questions?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, how did you, well, maybe not you, but how was it determined that 20 parts per million is cut off?
You want to take that one, Dan? It was.
It's a federal level. It's also used around the world. The EU uses it, the Japanese use it, the Chinese use it. I'm not an expert. It has something to do with dosage rates and the amount of domoic acid that could affect human health. And also it provides some buffer so that, as you saw in some of those graphics, the levels can go up really quick. So, you know, whether anybody's going to get sick at 20 parts per million, I personally don't think so, or 21 parts per million, but it can go from 20 to 110 in just a couple of days. But where that actually came from, it didn't come from Washington, it came from the FDA. And initially at one point, Washington, when we first started struggling with domoic acid, the Department of Health decided to use the level of 15 parts per million, just because we were having trouble collecting samples on the South Coast and getting them to Seattle on a timely enough basis. And over the years, we've smoothed that out, so they went back to the federal level of 20. And there is talk within the harmful algal bloom community nationwide that maybe 20 is too low, or correction, too high, and maybe it needs to be lower. Based on studies like that one we saw, a cohort study, where they're seeing levels, you know, of potentially issues with people who are eating domoic acid at 2 or 3 parts per million over a long period of time at high levels, are seeing some problems. So new work is being done in that area to try to look at, is 20 the right number? And frankly, I think if it isn't, they're going to go lower and not higher. That's something the FDA is working on.
Yeah, you know, there is one thing. Having grown up down here, without exaggerating, I mean thousands of clams. And so I found it really interesting to read some of the information that was given to me about the memory loss and all that. And it's really quite handy because when I forget to do something, I just remind my wife of all the clams I eat.
Sorry, Mike. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just wondering, has any research been done to see if the domoic acid levels are affected by processing, canning, or freezing?
Yes, they have done work by that. And domoic acid is actually a pretty stable compound, and it's not affected by freezing, processing, or cooking, or it's not like a bacteria that can be killed. It's a chemical component that doesn't go away, unfortunately.
From some of the studies that I've been involved in, where they try to come up with a level for toxicity, that they usually take 1/10 of what they think would be safe. If it's 100, they don't go for 10. So they have like an order of magnitude safety. So I mean, if you're eating 20, you go 21 or 25. I mean, you'd have to go for 200 under that scale. I don't know if they came up with that 20 on that basis.
Yeah, I mean, I wish Department of Health were here to address that, but you might be right. They don't.
And then one other thing, I don't want to be picky, but you were talking about your half of a square meter, and then you're talking about 5 clams per square meter, and then you said, well, if you looked at one of those rings and saw 5 clams.
Good point.
You don't only have to see 2.5, right?
Okay, yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Gotcha.
I dated his daughter once, so he could have been my father-in-law.
You dodged my old terror.
Discovered on the East Coast.
Can you repeat the question?
So she was asking how long there's been records of domoic acid in Washington State. We didn't discover or test for it.
Yeah, that'd be a great question for Department of Health, but they didn't find it till 1992, and they didn't find it till they looked. And if they were here and told you the story went, one of their lab chemists had gone to a meeting or some kind of training in Los Angeles. And at the time they were having trouble with issues with confused sea lions, wandering on the beach, off the beach in California. They were having trouble, pelicans dying in mass. They were testing and testing and testing. They found domoic acid. Prior to that, domoic acid had only been seen in eastern Canada, and prior to that, it had only been seen in Asia. And so this chemist came back, and at the time, all they were testing for was paralletic shellfish poisoning. And most of you know they do that with a mouse bioassay, where they inject a mouse with a solution of shellfish tissue, and they watch how the mouse reacts, and they have a way to determine whether it's been affected by domoic or by PSP. And what this chemist had learned at this workshop that he was at in San Francisco, that if the mouse began to scratch, that was an indicator of domoic acid. So he came home and thought, well, I have some fresh razor clams here that were just collected from Long Beach. We're going to test them for PSP, but let's see what happens. And lo and behold, they started to itch. So they sent, without telling us, they sent those samples to the lab, the FDA lab in Georgia. They have a great big FDA lab, public health lab in Georgia. And came back with high levels of domoic acid. And I got the phone call. It was the day before Veterans Day, November 10th, 1992, and they said, you need to close the beach at Long Beach immediately because of domoic acid. And I had no idea what they were talking about. So we were out here manning roadblocks and closing the beach, and slowly began to learn. And we all began this learning process. It was a big meeting, and they brought FDA in, and they had people from NOAA there, everybody trying to figure out what's going on. And you guys will recall that they closed crab fishing and the oyster industry. They closed everything at first until they could figure out what was going on. And then they finally started opening things again. So that was 92.
So this is just a little ancient history. And years ago, there were commercial diggers on Woodland Beach here, back in the 30s, 20s, and 30s. And they would can clams. The diggers would dig up, thousands of clams on a tide, and then they would can them. And they would clean the clams and then, treat them. And so the cleanings went to pigs and chickens that they kept right around the canneries. And so Ed Scholes, who was a commercial digger around here during the 20th century, who was a friend of the family, told me years ago, some days all the chickens and pigs died, and some days they staggered around for a while, and a lot of times they were fine. So we take that to mean we've had toxins here a lot longer than we realize.
They did in 92, I will tell you, they did, the Department of Health canvassed coastal communities trying to find people who had canned clams stuck way back in the back of their canning cabinet. And they found some from the early 70s, if I'm not mistaken. Do you remember this story?
That was 83.
Was it 80s?
Yeah,
Okay.
83.
Anyway, they found some a number of years back and tested them for domoic acid and found it. Not at high levels, but they found it. So it's a really good question. I grew up in Aberdeen. I've been eating them, maybe not as many as the senator, but I've eaten my share of clams, and I've never, to my knowledge, been sick. But I lose my car keys all the time.
So kind of a two-part question, but since the Long Beach district is so much larger than the other districts, has there been any consideration to creating sub-districts, and would that make any difference?
Well, we did get a letter from the Oceanfront Chamber asking that question in the spring. And we went back and looked at our data, we talked to the Department of Health at some length, and we didn't really see an area that was consistently low for the entire, during any of these closures. And we looked back at the history of how these beaches were determined, and they really were determined based on geographical breaks. And we can tell you that we have a lot of problems at Palos and Mock Rocks. Those are the two tribal beaches, and we did something this year to try to give people more digging opportunity, because generally people that come to visit up there don't just dig on one beach or the other, they make a choice, and maybe they'll go back and forth. So we worked out a deal with the Quinault tribe where we would have one beach open one day, and then we'd move to the other beach the next day, and they would take that beach. We kind of flipped and flopped. So instead of people coming up and getting to have both beaches for one weekend for 2 days, they got to come up for 2 weekends, and we started this on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, flip and flopping like that. They got to come on 2 weekends, and they got to dig on 4 beaches. Flip, flop. And we have had this horrendous problem with people that can't figure out which beach they're on. We put up great big red signs, this beach is closed. We put enforcement officers on the beach, and people are walking down through the dunes and getting onto the beach, and it's not a health problem. It's a co-management problem. So we don't have anybody getting sick, potentially. We just have the tribe have us, So, and they're busy out there running them off. And whether we do that again this next year, I don't know. So we might be back to where people get to dig one weekend on one beach, and then the tribe takes the next weekend of low tides for their diggers. Generally, there's 2 weekends of low tides each month, which is unfortunate. But so trying to manage large crowds of people over small areas is difficult. It's not impossible. And maybe down the road, if that opportunity presented ourselves, where we had one area or another that consistently was low, we haven't seen that yet. And the one thing Department of Health said, they asked us a couple of questions, is you need to step up your sampling, and if you're going to open a smaller area beach, you need to sample more. Right now, we sample 4 areas on Long Beach. If we were just going to open, I don't know, south of Cranberry or something, we need to sample 3 times in that area to make sure they're all low before we were to open. And then they asked, can you enforce it in the areas that are closed? And that's the more difficult question, can we? I mean, if it was all on the north end, people don't walk down, like north of the Razor Clam Reserve, that might be manageable. It would just block people from going north. But any place where there's people that can walk on, it gets really leaky. And it's just 17,000, think about 17,000, maybe it wouldn't be that many people, but thousands of people crammed into a smaller section, and then these other areas that are closed. And the fact that it's a health issue, and it's not just a tribal allocation issue, that's a tough question. And the department's stand at this point is no, you can't do it. But I can't say that if there were different circumstances down the road that something different might happen. I do know that we talked seriously this year. Typically, we end the season on May 15th at Long Beach to protect nesting snowy plovers on the north end of Long Beach. And this year, the beach hadn't been open forever. If demolic acid hadn't come along, we were going to dig the whole beach right up to May 15th. Then we were going to make an attempt to close the north end and dig some more after that. Not to say we do it every year, but because of the unusual circumstances. Just part of what we do is we take the enforcement officers that will be working that beach, see if people are digging legally, and at least take part of it and set up a road. So, I mean, there's give and take. We're ready to give that a shot.
Mark Michael, you said you have reserve lots, a few of the beaches. Are there differences? First question is, do you test the boric acid tests in those areas as well? And is there a difference because of the size of the plant, or any other reason between the reserve beaches and the regular beaches in terms of the
levels are, the levels are different between areas just because of the sample variation. We're only digging 12 clams, but they're not significantly different inside the reserves, outside the reserves.
I mean, on this beach, it jumped all over the place. Sometimes they'd be hot on the north end, sometimes they'd be hot on the south end, sometimes they were hot, it was above 20. And sometimes they were above 20 everywhere. At the very end, they were above 20 everywhere for sure. They were really elevated above 20 everywhere. And that's generally the case when it first hits. It goes up everywhere. And usually we're a pretty wide area. But you're only digging 12 clams, and the variation between clams can be pretty high. And, you know, we try to spread those samples out. A lot of times it's, you know, some weird tide, and it's the same group of 2 guys that got to drive this whole beach and dig 4 sets of 12 clams, and logistically, and it's, you know, or it's the, you know, 3 days before an opener, or 5 days before an opener, and it's blowing 50, and we got to have this stinking sample or we can't open, and we're out there. It's a major, can be a major challenge.
I've never dug as many Department of Health clams as I have the last year down here with the 4 sample
How'd they
a
taste?
week.
Yeah, there's a lot of, the best we can. Well, yeah. Right.
I just, given the economic impact of how it goes, which I honestly don't think that's appreciated as much as it should be.
Let me speak to that. I have 2 letters from, go ahead, but I'll speak to
I'm
that.
just going to say, so I'm looking at, if I saw the graph right, there's a lot of times where we're just right at the level. I mean, literally, if I saw that right, it was like 4 parts, and then it goes to 5. It seems like given the, you know, I would say if it wasn't an economic impact, then it's more of an inconvenience situation. But it's much more than that around the coast. And it seems like there should be a little more focus on whether we are using too much of a factor of safety on, I think there's a balance there, so for risk management. I mean,
Yeah.
is there any looking into that?
I mean, that'd be I mean, I don't want to pass the buck, Brian, but I can't speak for Department of Health, and they're the ones that say it's 20, you're closed. And that's frustrating to me sometimes too. You see, it's just, it was just 18 yesterday, you know? In that sample variation we talked about. But I mean, I do see that if you move a line, where do you move it to? But it's too bad they're not here, and I'm not going to speak for them. It wouldn't be fair. Okay.
So I have a couple of things to read. What do you want?
Why don't you step back
Back.
and then over a little?
No, you will. I see. I see what you want. So I have a couple of letters to read. The first one is from Randy Dennis. Who owns Dennis and Company. And his comments are, clam digging is huge to the economy of the Long Beach Peninsula, especially during the spring and fall months. People that tell you otherwise are just trying to put a positive spin on it. Granted, there are lots of great things to do in the Long Beach area other than clam digging, but having clam digging days consistently is the backbone of a good year here in this area. The lack of clam digging along with the bad spring weather has been a double whammy to our sales increases we have had the last couple of years. There are many things we can't control as a business. The natural resources and the weather are the 2 most important ones. When these are working well, business is working well. Complaining about either won't do us any good when both are beyond our control. As a business, we adjust our expenses and our advertising based on what these unknowns do or don't do. Clam digging is not decided by the Fish and Game Department, but by the Department of Health. And what they say trumps everything else. Just when we thought we were coming out of the toxin cycle during the Clam Festival, the very next week, the levels returned to being high again. This trend has us all concerned, and this may be the way it is for a long while, so we all need to continually adjust as business owners. The Long Beach Visitors Bureau does an amazing job promoting this area so that we will all survive. We just need to regroup a little and promote the beauty that we have and hope the weatherman is right, that good weather is right around the corner. Randy Dennis. And I have another letter from, this is from Tom Downer, who owns Jack's Country Store. and who has been very active in promoting different practices regarding the clamming. The economy of Pacific County has grown increasingly dependent upon tourism as an inducement for business investment. The activity created by the recreational harvest of razor clams is a key component of the outside revenue that flows in our direction. What elevates the importance of tourism to the local economy can be seen in changes in the retail landscape. 30 years ago, Pacific County retailers collectively retained 50% of locally generated retail dollars. Today, that retention is less than 25%, which means, of course, that we're losing 75% of our retail investment employment and tax revenues that can be associated with the spending by county residents. The ever-expanding growth in the differential in state and local tax rates induced local residents to favor their pocketbooks over the support of the community. We can readily observe that there has been a significant and sustained expansion of retail in the Astoria-Warrenton area, while it has been a full decade since any investor has chosen Pacific County as a viable location. To survive, retailers must present a value proposition where they excel at least 2 of the 5 competitive elements of price, quality, convenience, experience, and community. To thrive requires dominance of at least 3 of those elements. The first element, price, is eliminated by our non-competitive condition due to taxes. The good news is that Pacific County retailers are positioned to own razor clam digging due to the quality of the resource, especially convenient public access and an experience that is uniquely family-centric. Optimization of our opportunity requires the removal of all unnecessary impediments to fulfilling the goal of maximizing public enjoyment of the razor clam resource while protecting it for future generations. We've witnessed the benefit of improvements accomplished by WDFW to make it easier to purchase a razor clam license and the upward adjustments to the determination of sustainable harvest levels. WDFW has demonstrated that there are phenomenal benefits to the public when we advance our collective education, are unafraid to challenge our theories and experiment with our practices. We are now entirely dependent upon the Washington Department of Health to follow suit and ensure that the full economic benefit from razor clams is realized while the risks to the public health are responsibly managed. So those are a letter from 2 of our active citizens, and I am also going to invite Andy Day to give us a quick update. Andy is the head of the Visitors Bureau and has received allocates for her work promoting.
Well, thanks. So this is something, of course, we are very much aware of. Our organization, our role is to promote tourism industry in Pacific County and to increase visitor spending in Pacific County. So when Randy mentioned those people that are putting a positive spin on it, that's me, and that's our job. But, you know, we're data-driven, and I can share with you, I mean, there is an undeniable economic impact. For example, we look at visitor counts to our visitor centers, and this year to date, we're at 4,346. This year, last time, we were at 6,880. So that's a pretty drastic hit there. However, to put that in perspective, that puts us down back to 2013 levels. So it's still the 3rd or 4th best year ever. Our lodging tax collections is a really good, sorry, I need my readers and really good metric for us. Those are paid by visitors whenever they stay in any paid accommodations. One thing we're seeing already this year in unincorporated Pacific County is that we're down about 5%. So that represents, you know, is about 11,000 in lodging taxes collected, which calculates out to probably about 500,000 in gross sales. So that is, you know, and if you figure that every night someone stays in paid accommodations, they're also having 2 or 3 meals and participating in 2 or 3 activities, attractions, maybe buying some gas, maybe buying some souvenirs. You know, you multiply that out, and that is a pretty major impact. So that's the bad news, I guess you could say. The good news is we've been working really hard to work with our members to, not hang our hat on clam digging. Of course, we, take that ball and run with it, whenever we get the green light. But we really need to, avoid the Homer Simpson business plan where you rely on something you have absolutely no control over. So we really are working with our members to talk about things that are replicatable experiences, things that are available 24/7, 365 days a year. And we are very fortunate to have a lot of those assets in our area. So, it's a combination of trying to do damage control, if you will, for our industry and kind of redirect that interest but hopefully keep our industry healthy. So we do see that, last year, because we had a big hit in that fourth quarter last year. Despite that, the county still came in up about 5% overall. The city of Long Beach came in up, I think, 5 or 6% overall in lodging tax collections. Even this year, the first quarter in the city of Long Beach, their sales taxes are slightly above the same time last year, and the lodging taxes are holding steady. So that being said, those run about 2 months behind. So we're going to see two more months of decline probably before we see that turn around. We are, just to give you some other, perspective, the visitor spending in Pacific County last year came in at $172.1 million. If you divide that by the number of residents, that's well over 8,000 per resident. And we are the second highest county in the state of Washington in terms of that ratio, in terms of visitor spending per resident. Another thing to kind of put that in perspective, in 2015, 49 cents out of every taxable dollar was paid by a visitor. And in 2016, 14.1 million in state and local taxes were paid by visitors. So, state local taxes collected in Pacific County were paid by visitors. So it is important that we find a workaround here. And I want to, really thank Fish and Game for the work that they do in managing it, long-term, short-term, right? We're so fortunate that they are working on this and managing this resource for us. Otherwise we'd be like, Oregon. But not have any clams. So, and they're so great to work with, and they really do help us with promotion and communication, and they're very easy to get in touch with, and we really see them as great partners. So these are some of the things that we're working on to try to come around this. Any questions? Okay, thanks.
Well, let's move on then. I believe that we have David Patel. Up next. It's all yours.
Okay, so I'm David Cottrell, and I wear a number of hats down in the Grayland area. Talking today, so the image we have up here is of my drainage district hat. I ought to acknowledge that the erosion here, we formed an alliance last year that we're calling We Can, which is Willapa Erosion Control Alliance now. And that's Shoalwater Bay Tribe, Grand Cranberry Association, our drainage district, the homeowners of North Cove and Tokeland. DOT's got a major stake in it, and we're trying to work together on a collective solution to the whole whole problem, because frankly, something like this erosion along there, which they say is the fastest rate of erosion on the Pacific United States coast, well, you can't do that by just focusing on one little part of it. It's a pretty complex, everything in Willapa is a complex problem. And if you're looking at one cause and one effect, you're missing the whole thing. So this is